General Tony Rodriguez stood in the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains. The room was filled with screens showing military positions across human space. Officers moved quickly between stations, coordinating what appeared to be desperate defensive preparations, but appearances could be deceiving. "General, the evacuation of Colony 7 is complete," reported Colonel Beth Morgan. "All civilians have been moved to the backup locations." Tony nodded without looking up from his tactical display. For the past 6 months, humanity had been implementing Protocol Omega, a secret plan developed decades earlier for exactly this type of situation. To outside observers, it looked like humanity was preparing for a hopeless last stand. In reality, they were preparing something far more complex. "What's the status on the quantum research?" Tony asked. Dr. Amy Foster looked up from her computer terminal. She had been working with Dr. Webb's team to understand NIGMA technology. "General, we've made a breakthrough. The energy signatures we recorded from their ship show a fundamental weakness in their shielding systems." "Explain it in simple terms, Doctor." Amy pulled up a diagram on the main screen. "The NIGMA use quantum field generators to protect their ships and cities. It's incredibly advanced technology, much better than anything we have. But it has one problem. It assumes that any attack will come from outside the field." "And," Tony prompted, "if we can get our weapons inside the field before activating them, their shields become useless. In fact, the quantum field will actually amplify the damage because it tries to contain the explosion." Colonel Beth smiled grimly. "So their best defense becomes their biggest weakness if we can get past it." "Exactly. And we think we know how to do it." Commander Ryan Brooks entered the room carrying a secure data pad. "General, we just received confirmation from Captain Morrison. He's ready to deliver humanity's response to the NIGMA." Tony considered this. For months, they had been preparing for war while publicly appearing to debate surrender. The NIGMA had spies watching human space, and Tony wanted them to see exactly what humanity wanted them to see. "Send the message," he ordered. "It's time to let the NIGMA know what they're dealing with." 3 hours later, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, facing the same massive NIGMA ship he had visited months earlier. This time, however, he wasn't going aboard. This time, he was delivering humanity's answer to their ultimatum. "Open a channel," he ordered. The cold voice of High Commander Zethak filled the bridge. "Captain Morrison, have you come to inform us of humanity's submission?" "No," Jake replied calmly. "I've come to give you a warning." There was a pause. When Zethak spoke again, his voice carried a hint of amusement. "A warning? How entertaining. Please enlighten us." Jake took a deep breath. "Commander Zethak, we've studied your history. We know about the 847 species you've destroyed. We understand that you believe you're dealing with just another primitive civilization that will either submit or be easily eliminated. Correct. Which will you choose?" "Neither," Jake said firmly. "Humanity chooses a third option. There is no third option." "Commander, that's where you're wrong. You see, humanity has a trait that apparently none of those other species possessed. When we're threatened with extinction, we don't just fight to survive. We fight to ensure that our enemies can never threaten anyone else again." Back on Earth, General Rodriguez watched the conversation through secure communications. Everything was going according to plan. While Jake delivered the warning, thousands of human ships were moving to predetermined positions throughout the galaxy. To NIGMA sensors, it looked like humanity was spreading their forces thin in a desperate attempt to protect their colonies. In reality, those ships were positioning themselves for something the NIGMA had never experienced before. You see, Commander, Jake continued, we've learned something interesting about your empire. You've been using the same tactics for 50,000 years. You've become very good at destroying species that fight conventionally. But you've never faced a species that specializes in unconventional warfare. Dr. Amy Foster monitored the conversation from her laboratory. Around her, teams of scientists put the finishing touches on weapons that the NIGMA couldn't detect. Humanity had spent 6 months studying every piece of NIGMA technology they could find, looking for weaknesses. They had found several. Your threats are meaningless, Zethek replied. Your technology is primitive compared to ours. Your military is tiny. You have no allies willing to stand against us. You're right about our technology, Jake admitted. We can't match your ships or your weapons in a direct fight. But, Commander, you're making the same mistake that 847 species made before us. What mistake is that? You're assuming that superior technology guarantees victory. But humanity has a long history of defeating technologically superior enemies. We've learned that the best way to fight an advanced enemy is to change the rules of engagement. On a dozen hidden research stations, human scientists activated equipment that had been built in secret over the past 6 months, quantum tunneling devices, reality distortion weapons, and viral programs designed to infiltrate NIGMA computer systems. None of these weapons were as advanced as NIGMA technology, but they were designed to exploit the weaknesses that Dr. Foster's team had discovered. Commander Zethek, Jake said, humanity's response to your ultimatum is simple. If you attack us, we will not merely defend ourselves. We will ensure that the NIGMA Empire ceases to exist. Not just your military, not just your government, but your entire civilization. We will erase you so completely that future species will forget you ever existed. The communication channel was silent for almost a minute. When Zethek spoke again, his voice had lost its amused tone. You dare threaten the NIGMA Empire? We have ruled this galaxy for 50 millennia. We have weapons that can destroy stars. We have fleets that number in the millions. Yes, Jake replied calmly. And we've spent 6 months figuring out how to turn all of that against you. General Rodriguez smiled as he watched the NIGMA ship's energy readings spike. They were clearly agitated by Jake's warning. Good. Agitated enemies made mistakes. Commander, Jake continued, you told us that there are 2 types of species in the galaxy, those who serve you and those who are extinct. You were wrong. There's a 3rd type, species that are willing to drag their enemies into extinction with them. Humanity is the 3rd type. Your bravado will not save you, Zethek snarled. We will arrive at your homeworld in 6 months. You will learn what happens to species that defy the NIGMA Empire. 6 months, Jake repeated. Thank you for the timeline, Commander. It's exactly what we needed to know. The communication ended abruptly. Jake turned to his crew, all of whom were smiling grimly. Did you get the readings? He asked his science officer. Yes, sir. Dr. Foster was right. Their quantum fields fluctuate in a predictable pattern when they're angry. We now know exactly when their shields are weakest. Back on Earth, General Rodriguez received confirmation that the warning had been delivered. The NIGMA would arrive in 6 months, expecting to find a demoralized enemy preparing for extinction. Instead, they would find something that no species in galactic history had ever prepared for them. They would find humanity ready for total war. Dr. Amy Foster looked at her calculations one final time. The quantum weapons were ready. The infiltration viruses were prepared. The evacuation of non-essential personnel was complete. Humanity had spent 6 months preparing for a war that would determine whether their species survived or whether they took their enemies down with them. "General," she said to Rodriguez, "we're ready." "Ready for what, Doctor?" "Ready to show the NIGMA Empire what extinction really looks like." Dr. Marcus Webb had not slept for 3 days. His office on Earth was covered with star charts, alien language translations, and historical records. Coffee cups and food containers were scattered across every surface. His team of researchers worked around the clock, trying to understand everything they could about the NIGMA Empire. "Doctor, you need to see this," said his assistant, Dr. Helen Ross. She was one of the smartest people Marcus had ever met, specializing in alien psychology and warfare patterns. "I've been analyzing the data we collected from their ship," Marcus looked up from his computer screen, his eyes red with exhaustion. "What did you find?" "The NIGMA weren't lying about those 847 species," Helen said, placing a thick folder on his desk. "I cross-referenced their star charts with our galactic databases. Every empty sector they showed us used to contain a civilization. Some of them were incredibly advanced." She opened the folder and pulled out several photographs. "Look at this. The Kellar system. It was home to a species that had mastered quantum physics 1,000 years before humans invented the wheel. The archaeological evidence shows they had cities that floated in space without any visible technology supporting them." Marcus studied the images. They showed empty planets with strange, beautiful ruins. "What happened to them?" "According to the few records that survived, they were contacted by the NIGMA about 3,000 years ago. The Kellar refused to submit. Within 6 months, every Kellar in the galaxy was dead. Their planets were left empty, their technology destroyed. The NIGMA even erased most of the historical records about them." Helen pulled out more files. "It's the same pattern every time. The NIGMA make contact, demand submission, and when they're refused, they don't just win a war. They commit complete genocide. They wipe out entire species so thoroughly that most of the galaxy forgets they ever existed." Marcus rubbed his tired eyes. "How do they do it? Some of these species were more advanced than we are. That's what scares me," Helen replied. "The NIGMA don't just have superior technology. They have a system. They've been doing this for so long that they've perfected the process of extinction." Admiral Lisa Carter entered the office without knocking. She looked as tired as Marcus felt. "Doctor, I need your report. The World Council is meeting in 2 hours to decide how humanity responds to the NIGMA ultimatum." Marcus stood up and handed her a data pad. "Admiral, I'll give you the short version. The NIGMA Empire is the most successful genocidal organization in galactic history. They've been systematically eliminating species for 50,000 years. They're not just conquerors, they're extinction specialists. But they can be defeated?" Carter asked hopefully. "Unknown," Marcus replied honestly. "The problem is that no species has ever survived long enough to leave detailed records of NIGMA military tactics. We know they attack quickly and completely, but we don't know their weaknesses because everyone who fought them is dead." Helen stepped forward. "Admiral, there's something else. The NIGMA don't just kill their enemies. They erase them from history. They have technology that can delete information from computer systems across the galaxy. Most species don't even remember that the extinct civilizations ever existed." Carter was quiet for a moment. "So if we fight them and lose, humanity will just disappear?" "Completely," Marcus confirmed. "In a few hundred years, no one will remember that humans ever existed. Earth will be an empty planet, and other species will assume it was always uninhabited." The Admiral walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Millions of people were going about their daily lives. unaware that their entire species had been given a death sentence. "What about submission?" she asked. "What happens to species that accept NIGMA rule?" Helen consulted her notes. "Based on the evidence, they become slaves. The NIGMA use them for labor, resources, and sometimes as soldiers to conquer other species. But even the servant species don't live very long. Most are worked to death within a few generations. So our choices are slavery or extinction," Carter said bitterly. "Those appear to be the only options the NIGMA have ever offered," Marcus confirmed. Carter turned back to them. "Dr. Webb, I need you to prepare a presentation for the World Council. They need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." "Admiral," Marcus said carefully, "there's one more thing. Captain Morrison asked me to prepare a response to the NIGMA. He wants to send them a message." "What kind of message?" Marcus pulled up a document on his computer. "A warning. He wants to tell them that humanity is different from the other species they've encountered." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "Captain Morrison believes that humans have a unique trait that the NIGMA haven't encountered before. When most species are threatened with extinction, they fight to survive. When humans are threatened with extinction, they fight to ensure their enemies can never threaten anyone else again." "Explain." Marcus stood up and walked to a wall covered with human military history. "Admiral, look at our own history. When humans are pushed to the edge of destruction, we don't just defend ourselves. We develop weapons that can destroy our enemies completely. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, chemical attacks. When humans face extinction, we create ways to make our enemies extinct instead. The NIGMA have superior technology," Carter pointed out. "Yes, but they've been using the same tactics for thousands of years," Helen added. "They've never faced a species that responds to extinction threats by becoming more dangerous instead of more afraid." Carter considered this. "You think we should threaten them?" "Not threaten," Marcus corrected. "Warn. There's a difference. Captain, Morrison wants to explain to the NIGMA that if they try to extinct humanity, they'll discover that humans become extremely creative when it comes to ensuring mutual destruction." "But can we actually back up such a warning?" Carter asked. Marcus smiled for the first time in days. "Admiral, you know about Project Deep Strike, right?" Carter's face went pale. Project Deep Strike was one of humanity's most classified military programs. "You're not suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything," Marcus said. "But Captain Morrison wants the NIGMA to understand that humanity has been preparing for exactly this type of threat for over a century. We may not be as advanced as they are, but we've had a lot of practice at total warfare." Helen pulled up another file. "Admiral, I've been studying human military psychology. When most species face a superior enemy, they try to negotiate or surrender. When humans face a superior enemy, they start looking for ways to bring the enemy down to their level. And humans are very good at bringing things down." Carter was quiet for several minutes. "Prepare both presentations," she finally said. "The World Council needs to understand what we're facing, and Captain Morrison's warning needs to be ready to send." "Admiral," Marcus said as she reached the door, "there's one more thing the NIGMA should know about humans." "What's that?" "We're very good at learning from other people's mistakes, and we've just learned about 847 species that made the mistake of underestimating their enemies. We don't intend to make the same error." As Admiral Carter left, Marcus turned back to his research. He had work to do. The NIGMA Empire had given humanity 1 year to choose between slavery and extinction. But Marcus was beginning to think that humanity might have a third option, one that the NIGMA had never encountered before. The only question was whether they could pull it off before the year was up. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the stars shift as his ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The year was 2387, and humanity had been exploring space for over 200 years. They had met friendly aliens, traded with distant worlds, and built a small but growing empire among the stars. "Captain, we're getting strange readings," said Lieutenant Amy Foster from her station. "There's a massive ship ahead of us. It's bigger than anything we've ever seen." Jake looked at the main screen. A huge alien vessel hung in space like a dark mountain. It was at least 10 times larger than the New Horizon, with strange symbols glowing along its hull. The ship looked ancient but powerful, like it had been built by a civilization far older than humanity. "Send a message," Jake ordered. "Tell them we're peaceful explorers from Earth." The response came quickly. A voice spoke in perfect English, though it sounded cold and mechanical. "Humans, you will come aboard our vessel, now." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Most aliens they had met were polite, even when they disagreed. This voice sounded like it was giving orders to a pet. "Sir, Admiral Carter wants to speak with you," said Communications Officer Ryan Brooks. The image of Admiral Lisa Carter appeared on screen. She was the head of Earth's space diplomatic team and had dealt with aliens for 20 years. "Jake, this is important," she said. "Our long-range sensors show this isn't just one ship. There are thousands of them spread across this sector of space. We think we've found the NIGMA Empire." Jake had heard stories about the NIGMA. They were an ancient race that controlled a huge part of the galaxy. Some said they had been ruling space for 50,000 years. Others whispered that any species that opposed them simply disappeared. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Jake asked. "Go aboard their ship. Talk to them, but be careful. We don't know what they want." An hour later, Jake found himself in a transport shuttle with Dr. Marcus Webb, Earth's top expert on alien cultures. Marcus was nervous, which was unusual for him. He had studied hundreds of alien species and was usually excited to meet new ones. "Captain, I've been reading everything we know about the NIGMA," Marcus said as their shuttle approached the alien ship. "They've been in contact with over 800 different species in the last 10,000 years. But here's the strange part. Most of those species don't exist anymore." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "I mean they're gone. Completely. No trace of them anywhere. It's like they were wiped out of history." The NIGMA ship was even more impressive, up close. Its hull was made of some dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols pulsed with blue energy along its surface. When their shuttle landed in the docking bay, Jake could see that the ship was incredibly old, but perfectly maintained. Two NIGMA beings met them at the airlock. They were tall and thin, with pale gray skin and large black eyes. They wore flowing robes that seemed to move on their own. When they spoke, their voices were the same cold, mechanical tone Jake had heard earlier. "Follow," one of them said. They led Jake and Marcus through corridors filled with technology that humanity could barely understand. The walls showed star maps of the entire galaxy, with different areas marked in various colors. They entered a vast chamber where a single NIGMA sat on a throne-like chair. This one was clearly important. Its robes were more elaborate and strange. Symbols floated in the air around it. "I am High Commander Zethak of the NIGMA Empire," it said. "You are representatives of the species called humans." "Yes," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm Captain Morrison, and this is Dr. Webb. We come in peace, hoping to establish friendly relations between our peoples. Zethak made a sound that might have been laughter, but it was cold and unpleasant. Friendly relations? How amusing. Tell me, Captain Morrison, how many star systems does your species control? About 40, Jake answered honestly. 40. Zethak seemed to consider this. The NIGMA Empire controls 12,000 systems. We have ruled this galaxy for longer than your species has existed. We are not interested in friendly relations with primitives. Marcus stepped forward. With respect, Commander, humanity may be young, but we've learned much about cooperation with other species. We believe all intelligent life has value. All intelligent life has value, Zethak repeated, its voice mocking. How naive. Dr. Webb, is it? Let me educate you about the galaxy. There are two types of species, those who serve the NIGMA Empire and those who are removed from existence. There is no third option. Removed? Jake asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. Eliminated. Erased. Made extinct. We have perfected this process over 50 millennia. When we encounter a new species, we give them one chance to submit to our rule. If they refuse, they cease to exist. Not just their military or their government, their entire species. Every planet they live on becomes empty space. Every ship they built becomes scrap metal. Every record of their existence is deleted from galactic databases. The chamber fell silent except for the quiet hum of alien technology. Jake felt his heart pounding. Marcus had gone completely pale. Now, Zethak continued, humanity will make this choice. You have exactly one of your solar cycles, what you call a year, to decide. Submit to the NIGMA Empire and become our servants, or face complete extinction. These are your only options. And if we choose to remain independent? Jake asked, though he knew it was a foolish question. Then in 1 year, there will be no more humans in the galaxy. Your worlds will be empty. Your ships will be destroyed. Your history will be erased. Other species will forget you ever existed. This is not a threat, Captain Morrison. This is simply how the galaxy works. Jake and Marcus exchanged glances. They both understood that they were facing something far more dangerous than they had imagined. This wasn't a negotiation or a diplomatic meeting. It was an ultimatum from a species that had apparently committed genocide hundreds of times. We'll need to discuss this with our government, Jake said carefully. Of course, you have 1 year. Do not waste it on foolish hopes of resistance. 847 species have made that mistake. None of them exist anymore. As they were escorted back to their shuttle, Marcus whispered to Jake, Captain, I don't think they're bluffing. The star charts I saw, there are huge empty sectors where civilization should be. I think they really have been wiping out entire species for thousands of years. Jake nodded grimly. As their shuttle left the NIGMA ship, he was already planning the message he would send to Earth. Humanity had 1 year to decide its fate. But somehow, Jake suspected that neither submission nor extinction were options his species would accept quietly. War Prime Zethak stood on the command bridge of the NIGMA flagship Eternal Dominion, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger on the main display. Around his massive ship, 10,000 NIGMA vessels moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls gleaming in the light of Earth's sun. It was the largest extermination fleet the NIGMA had assembled in over 1,000 years. Scan results, War Prime, reported his tactical officer. Human military forces are scattered across 43 systems. Their main fleet appears to be defending their outer colonies. Earth itself has minimal orbital defenses. Zethak made a sound of satisfaction. As expected, the humans are following the same pattern as species 674 through 847. Desperate defense, scattered forces, false hope. He had commanded 17 extinction campaigns in his long life. Humans were reacting exactly like every other doomed species. Their warning 6 months ago had been nothing but empty bravado, the death cry of a species that knew it was about to die. War Prime. We're receiving a transmission from Earth, his communications officer announced. Display it. Captain Jake Morrison appeared on the screen. He was standing on what appeared to be the bridge of a human warship, but Zethak noticed that the background looked different from their previous encounters. The human looked tired but determined. War Prime Zethak, Jake said. I want to offer you one final chance to withdraw from human space. Zethak laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the bridge. Captain Morrison, how amusing that you think you're in a position to make offers. Look around you, human. Your pathetic planet is surrounded by 10,000 NIGMA warships. Your military is scattered across the galaxy in a futile attempt to protect colonies that we will sterilize anyway. Yes, Jake replied calmly. Your fleet is impressive, but War Prime. You're about to make the same mistake that cost 847 species their lives. What mistake is that? You're assuming that you understand what you're fighting. The transmission ended. Zethak stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to his tactical officer. Begin the bombardment. Start with their major cities. The first wave of NIGMA ships moved toward Earth, their quantum cannons charging. These weapons could turn entire continents into glass, and they had done so on hundreds of worlds. But as they approached optimal firing range, something unexpected happened. War Prime! The tactical officer called out in alarm. The human orbital stations are not what they appear to be. On the display, what had looked like simple space stations suddenly unfolded like metal flowers. Hidden weapon systems emerged from camouflaged structures. But these weren't normal weapons. They fired beams of energy that seemed to bend space itself. Quantum distortion weapons, Zethak's science officer reported, his voice filled with surprise. They're targeting our shield generators directly. 3 NIGMA cruisers exploded in rapid succession as the human weapons found their targets with impossible accuracy. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the explosions seemed to create holes in space-time itself, and more. Human weapons emerged from those holes. Impossible, Zethak muttered. They're using quantum tunneling to bypass our shields. On Earth, General Tony Rodriguez watched the battle from his command center. Dr. Foster, how are the quantum weapons performing? Better than expected, General, Amy replied from her station. The NIGMA shields are actually amplifying our attacks just like we predicted. Their own technology is working against them. And the main plan? Proceeding on schedule. The NIGMA are focusing on our defensive positions exactly as we wanted, above Earth's surface. The battle looked like a desperate last stand. Human ships emerged from hidden positions to engage the NIGMA fleet in what appeared to be suicidal attacks. Many human vessels were destroyed quickly, their wreckage falling toward Earth's atmosphere. But Zethak was beginning to notice something disturbing. The human ships were fighting in patterns that made no tactical sense. They were attacking specific NIGMA vessels while ignoring others. They were targeting communication arrays and sensor stations instead of weapon systems. War Prime, his intelligence officer reported. We're losing contact with our reconnaissance units throughout human space. What do you mean, losing contact? Sir, it appears that while we've been focused on Earth, human forces have been attacking. Our scout ships and sensor arrays across 40 systems. We're going blind. Zathak felt the first hint of unease. How many ships have we lost? Approximately 300, sir. But War Prime, that's not the concerning part. Explain. The attacks are too coordinated. The humans are hitting targets simultaneously across dozens of star systems. Either they have many more ships than we detected, or what? Or the ships we're fighting here aren't their main fleet. On the surface of Earth, civilians watched the battle through news broadcasts. To them, it looked like humanity was losing badly. Human ships exploded in brilliant flashes while the massive NIGMA fleet seemed unstoppable. Fear spread through the population as reports came in of colonies under attack. But in the hidden command centers, human military leaders were smiling. Phase 1 complete, reported Colonel Beth Morgan. The NIGMA have committed their main fleet to the Earth attack. All their reserve forces are moving to support the assault. Phase 2? Asked General Rodriguez. Beginning now. Across the galaxy, the real human fleet emerged from hiding. For 6 months, humanity had been moving ships to carefully planned positions while making it appear that their forces were weak and scattered. The NIGMA had been watching human military movements, but they had been watching exactly what humanity wanted them to see. Admiral Paul Davis commanded the human strike force from his flagship New Constitution. Unlike the ships defending Earth, this fleet was equipped with humanity's most advanced weapons. They had spent 6 months studying NIGMA technology and developing specific countermeasures. All ships, this is Admiral Davis, he broadcast to his fleet. The NIGMA believe they are exterminating another helpless species. Show them what happens when they threaten humanity. The quantum tunneling devices activated simultaneously across 1,000 NIGMA worlds. Human strike teams emerged inside NIGMA cities, their weapons designed to exploit every weakness Amy Foster's team had discovered. But these weren't random attacks. They were surgical strikes targeting specific infrastructure. War Prime Zathak received the first reports 20 minutes into the Earth assault. What do you mean our homeworld is under attack? Sir, human forces have somehow penetrated our planetary defenses. They're not targeting population centers. They're destroying our historical archives, our cultural centers, our data storage, facilities. More reports flooded in. NIGMA colonies across 12 systems were under simultaneous attack. But the humans weren't following normal military doctrine. They weren't trying to capture territory or destroy military targets. They were systematically erasing NIGMA civilization. War Prime, his communication officer called out urgently. We're receiving an emergency transmission from the High Council on the homeworld. The image that appeared on screen showed chaos. Ancient NIGMA monuments were crumbling as human weapons tore through quantum shields that had protected them for millennia. But the most disturbing sight was the humans themselves. They moved with perfect coordination, like they had been planning this assault for years. All NIGMA forces, came the desperate broadcast from the homeworld. Abandon current operations and return immediately. The humans are destroying our history. They're erasing our culture. If we don't stop them now, there will be nothing left of our civilization. Zathak stared at the screen in growing horror. In 6 hours of fighting, humanity had done something that no enemy had ever attempted. They weren't just fighting the NIGMA military. They were attacking the very foundation of NIGMA society. Sir, his tactical officer said quietly, I think we need to retreat. Retreat? Zathak turned on him angrily. The NIGMA Empire does not retreat from primitives. With respect, War Prime, I don't think these humans are primitives. I think we may have made a serious mistake." As if to emphasize the point, another wave of human ships emerged from quantum tunnels, appearing directly behind the NIGMA fleet. These ships were different from the ones they had been fighting, larger, more advanced, and carrying weapons that seemed to tear holes in reality itself. For the first time in 50,000 years, the NIGMA Empire was losing a war. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the Situation Room beneath Geneva, watching displays that showed the true scope of humanity's operation. For 6 months, the world had believed they were preparing for a desperate last stand. Now the truth was revealed. They had been preparing for the complete destruction of the NIGMA Empire. "Admiral, Phase 3 is ready to begin," reported Lieutenant Colonel Kate Sullivan. She was in charge of the hidden weapons systems that had been disguised as civilian infrastructure across human space. "Status report on the NIGMA fleet at Earth?" Carter asked. "Confused and divided," Kate replied with satisfaction. "Half of them are trying to continue the attack on Earth, while the other half are receiving orders to return to defend their homeworld. War Prime Zethak is losing control of his forces." On the main display, Carter could see the NIGMA fleet beginning to break formation. Their perfect military discipline was cracking as reports came in from across their empire. Humanity wasn't just defending. They were systematically dismantling NIGMA civilization. "Activate the orbital platforms," Carter ordered. Above Earth, what the NIGMA had assumed were destroyed human defensive stations suddenly came back to life. The wreckage that had been floating in orbit reformed into complex weapons platforms. The NIGMA had been watching human ships explode for hours, but they had been seeing exactly what humanity wanted them to see. The platforms weren't just weapons. They were quantum field disruptors that could turn NIGMA technology against itself. As they activated, NIGMA ships throughout the Earth system began to lose power. Their weapons shut down, their shields collapsed, and their engines failed. "How is this possible?" War Prime Zethek demanded as his flagship began to drift helplessly through space. His science officer studied the readings with growing alarm. "Sir, the humans have been feeding false data into our sensors for months. Every battle we thought we won, every ship we thought we destroyed. It was all carefully planned deception." "You mean the humans have been losing on purpose?" "Yes, sir. They've been studying our tactics, learning our weaknesses and positioning. They're real forces while we were focused on destroying decoys." Captain Jake Morrison's voice came over the communication system, calm and professional. "War Prime Zethak, this is your final warning. Order your forces to surrender, or we will complete the destruction of your empire." "Surrender?" Zethak snarled. "The NIGMA Empire has never surrendered to anyone. Then you'll be the first NIGMA to watch your empire die," Jake replied. "Dr. Webb, would you explain to the War Prime what's happening to his civilization?" Dr. Marcus Webb appeared on screen, standing in what looked like a NIGMA archive facility. Behind him, ancient NIGMA texts and historical records were being systematically destroyed by human soldiers. "War Prime," Marcus said, "for the past 6 hours, human forces have been implementing what we call civilizational erasure. We're not just destroying your military, we're eliminating every trace of NIGMA culture, history, and technology." "Impossible. Our archives are protected by quantum locks that cannot be broken." Marcus held up a device that was glowing with blue energy. "Actually, they can be broken quite easily once you understand how they work. You see, War Prime, humanity spent 6 months studying every piece of NIGMA technology we could find. Your locks are very sophisticated, but they have a fatal flaw. They assume that only NIGMA technology can access them. on dozens of NIGMA worlds, human teams were carrying out the same operation. They weren't trying to capture NIGMA territory. They were erasing NIGMA civilization so completely that future generations would never know it had existed. Your art, your literature, your scientific discoveries, your historical records, Marcus continued, all of it is being deleted from existence. In 12 hours, there will be no evidence that the NIGMA Empire ever existed. Zethak felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. You cannot do this. Galactic law prohibits the complete destruction of a civilization. Galactic law? Jake's voice carried a hint of amusement. War Prime. You've destroyed 847 civilizations. You've erased entire species from existence. Why should humanity follow laws that you've been ignoring for 50,000 years? On the NIGMA homeworld, High Commander Vorthak watched in horror as human forces systematically destroyed everything that made his people who they were. The humans moved with terrifying efficiency, targeting museums, libraries, cultural centers, and data storage facilities. How did they get past our defenses? He asked his advisors. Sir, they didn't attack our defenses, his intelligence chief replied. They bypassed them completely. These humans appear to have technology that can move through solid matter and emerge anywhere they choose. Our quantum barriers? Useless. The humans seem to understand our technology better than we do. What the NIGMA didn't realize was that humanity had spent centuries perfecting the art of total warfare. When humans faced extinction, they didn't just defend, they developed ways to ensure their enemies could never threaten anyone else again. Dr. Amy Foster monitored the operation from her laboratory on Earth. General Rodriguez, the viral programs are working perfectly. We're gaining access to NIGMA computer networks across their entire empire. What's the status on the memory virus? Tony asked. Ready to deploy. Once we activate it, every computer system in NIGMA space will begin deleting all records of their civilization. Their own technology will erase their history. And the biological component? Dr. Helen Ross looked up from her workstation. The targeted pathogen is ready. It's designed to affect only NIGMA DNA, and it will ensure that no NIGMA survivors can rebuild their species. Carter listened to these reports with mixed feelings. What humanity was doing to the NIGMA was terrible, but it was also necessary. The NIGMA had made it clear that they would never stop trying to exterminate other species. The only way to protect the galaxy was to ensure that the NIGMA Empire ceased to exist. Admiral, came a report from the front lines, War Prime Zethak is requesting a ceasefire. Put him through! Zethak's image appeared on screen. The proud NIGMA leader looked defeated and desperate. Admiral Carter, I am prepared to discuss terms for ending this conflict. Terms? Carter replied coldly. War Prime, you gave humanity two choices, submission or extinction. We're giving you the same options. You want us to submit to human rule? No, Carter said firmly. We want you to become extinct. You've proven that the NIGMA Empire cannot coexist peacefully with other species. Therefore, the NIGMA Empire must be eliminated. But we can change. We can learn to live peacefully. Captain Morrison's voice cut in. War Prime, you've had 50,000 years to learn peaceful coexistence. Instead, you've spent that time committing genocide. Humanity has decided that the galaxy will be safer without the NIGMA Empire. This is barbaric. Yes, Jake agreed. It is. But you taught us that sometimes barbarism is necessary. You showed us that some species are simply too dangerous to be allowed to continue existing. Admiral Paul Davis, commanding the main human fleet, reported in from across the galaxy. Admiral Carter, we've completed the destruction of NIGMA military infrastructure on 47 worlds. Their fleet is scattered and powerless. We're ready to begin the final phase. Carter took a deep breath. Begin total sterilization. Leave no NIGMA survivors. Across the galaxy, humanity's carefully planned operation entered its final stage. The NIGMA Empire, which had ruled space for 50 millennia, was about to learn what extinction really meant. But unlike their previous victims, the NIGMA would not be forgotten by history. They would be remembered as the empire that made the mistake of threatening humanity with extinction, and discovered that humans were very good at making that threat a reality. Colonel Beth Morgan stood in the command center of the human assault ship, Freedom's Edge, watching as her strike teams completed their missions across NIGMA space. The ship hung in orbit above what had once been the cultural heart of the NIGMA Empire, a world covered in ancient cities and monuments that had stood for tens of thousands of years. Now those cities were burning. "Colonel, Team 7 has completed the archive destruction," reported Sergeant Danny Price through his communication device. "All historical records from the last 10,000 years have been eliminated." "What about the genetic repositories?" Beth asked. "Gone. Dr. Ross's biological weapon worked perfectly. Every NIGMA DNA sample, every genetic backup, every cloning facility, all destroyed. Even if some NIGMA escape this assault, they won't be able to rebuild their population." Beth watched the tactical display as similar reports came in from across the galaxy. Humanity had divided the NIGMA Empire into sectors and assigned specialized teams to each one. Some teams destroyed military targets, others eliminated cultural sites, and still others focused on erasing all scientific and technological knowledge. This wasn't just war, it was the systematic elimination of an entire civilization. "Colonel Morgan," came a transmission from Admiral Davis aboard the human flagship. "How long until your sector is completely sterilized?" 6 hours, Admiral," Beth replied. "We're ahead of schedule. The NIGMA defensive systems were designed to stop conventional attacks, not this type of assault." "Any resistance?" "Minimal. Most NIGMA forces are still trying to regroup after the initial surprise. The few that have organized are focusing on protecting their military installations instead of their cultural sites. They still don't understand what we're doing," Admiral Davis observed. Beth nodded. The NIGMA were thinking like conquerors, not like a species facing extinction. They were trying to preserve their military capability for a counterattack instead of protecting what made them who they were. They had no idea that humanity wasn't interested in conquest, Captain. Steve Hamilton led his team through the ruins of what had been the NIGMA's greatest university. Ancient stone buildings that had housed 50 millennia of learning were now empty shells. His soldiers moved efficiently through the corridors, their quantum disruptors making quick work of any remaining data storage devices. "Captain," called Specialist Maria Santos, "I found their main historical database. It's protected by some kind of quantum encryption." Steve looked at the massive crystalline structure that pulsed with alien energy. According to their intelligence, this single database contained the complete history of the NIGMA Empire. Every conquest, every extinct species, every technological achievement. "Use the reality anchor," he ordered. Maria activated a device that Dr. Foster's team had designed specifically for this mission. The quantum encryption that protected the database depended on maintaining a stable space-time field. The reality anchor disrupted that field, causing the encryption to collapse. "That's impossible. whispered a NIGMA scientist who had been hiding in the facility. "That database has been protected for 20,000 years." Steve turned to look at the alien. "Your empire spent 50,000 years perfecting destruction. Humanity spent 200 years perfecting something better, the complete erasure of our enemies. The database began to dissolve as the reality anchor did its work. 50 millennia of NIGMA history vanished in minutes, leaving nothing but empty crystal." "Please," the NIGMA scientist begged. "This is our entire cultural heritage. Without these records, future generations will never know who we were." "That's the point," Steve replied without emotion. "When humanity is finished, there won't be any future generations." Dr. Helen Ross monitored the biological warfare component of the operation from her mobile laboratory. Her targeted pathogen was spreading through NIGMA populations with devastating efficiency. Unlike the plagues that the NIGMA had used on other species, Helen's weapon was designed for complete species elimination. Dr. Ross, her assistant, reported, "The pathogen has reached 97% of NIGMA worlds. Projected time to complete species extinction is 18 hours. Any mutations or resistance? None detected. The pathogen is specifically designed to target NIGMA DNA. It's completely harmless to other species, but 100% fatal to the NIGMA." Helen felt a moment of regret as she watched the biological readings. She was a scientist, not a soldier, and the complete extinction of an intelligent species went against everything. She had been taught about the value of life, but then she remembered the reports about the 847 species that the NIGMA had eliminated. Each of those civilizations had probably had scientists like her, people who valued life and knowledge. The NIGMA had killed them all without hesitation. "Continue the operation," she ordered. Commander Ryan Brooks led the assault on the NIGMA's main communication hub, a massive space station that coordinated information across their entire empire. His mission was to ensure that no NIGMA survivors could contact each other or call for help. "Commander, we've taken control of their quantum communication array," reported Lieutenant Tom Baker. "All NIGMA forces are now cut off from each other." "What about their distress signals?" "Blocked. No one outside NIGMA space will know what's happening here until we decide to tell them." Ryan looked at the display showing NIGMA communication attempts. Across the galaxy, thousands of desperate messages were being sent, calls for help, evacuation requests, final messages from dying worlds. None of them would reach their destinations. "Sir," Tom said quietly, "some of these messages are from civilian populations, families trying to contact each other, children looking for their parents." "I know," Ryan replied. "Record them all. After the operation is complete, we'll need evidence of what we did here." "Evidence for what?" "For the war crimes tribunal that will probably be held. What we're doing to the NIGMA is necessary, but it's not legal under galactic law. Humanity will have to answer for this eventually." Dr. Marcus Webb stood in the ruins of the NIGMA's greatest library, watching as the last of their written works burned. Around him, human soldiers used quantum flames to ensure that nothing could be recovered. Not even ash would remain. "Dr. Webb," his assistant called out, "we found something you should see." She led him to a hidden chamber, where thousands of NIGMA children were huddled together. They looked terrified but defiant, their large black eyes filled with the same cold intelligence that had characterized their species for millennia. "They're just children," his assistant said. Marcus looked at the young NIGMA and felt his resolve waver. These beings had done nothing wrong. They were innocent of their species' crimes. But then he remembered the reports from the extinct civilizations. How many alien children had died when the NIGMA sterilized their worlds? How many innocent beings had been eliminated because their species refused to submit? "Complete the mission," he ordered, then turned and walked away. His assistant stared after him in shock. "Sir, they're children." "Children grow up," Marcus replied without looking back. "And NIGMA children grow up to become the beings that destroyed 847 species. This ends here." Admiral Lisa Carter received status reports from across the operation. In 18 hours, humanity had accomplished something that should have been impossible. The complete destruction of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. "Admiral," reported her communication officer, "we're receiving surrender offers from the last NIGMA holdouts. They're willing to accept any terms." "Terms?" Carter laughed bitterly. "They gave us two choices, submission or extinction. We chose extinction for them." "But Admiral, some of these groups include civilians, scientists, even children." Carter was quiet for a long moment. What humanity was doing was monstrous, but it was also necessary. The NIGMA had proven that they were a species incapable of coexisting peacefully with others. "No survivors," she said finally. "The galaxy will be safer without the NIGMA Empire." As the operation entered its final phase, humanity faced a terrible truth. To protect the galaxy from the NIGMA, they had become something almost as terrible as their enemies. They had chosen to commit genocide to prevent genocide. But unlike the NIGMA, humanity would remember what they had done. They would carry the weight of this decision for generations to come. The NIGMA Empire was dying, and with it died any hope that intelligent species could solve their differences through peaceful means. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the New Horizon, looking out at empty space where the NIGMA capital world had once existed. 1 year had passed since War Prime Zethak had delivered his ultimatum to humanity. Now there was nothing here but silent stars and drifting cosmic dust. "Captain," said Dr. Marcus Webb, joining him at the window, "the final verification is complete. Every trace of NIGMA civilization has been eliminated. The species is extinct." Jake nodded slowly. The past year had changed him, changed all of humanity. They had discovered something about themselves that they hadn't known before. When pushed to the edge of extinction, humans became incredibly dangerous. "Any second thoughts, Doctor?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "About the extinction itself?" "No. The NIGMA made it clear that peaceful coexistence was impossible. But about what we became. In the process," he shrugged, "that troubles me." Behind them, Admiral Lisa Carter approached with a data pad in her hands. "Gentlemen, I have the final casualty reports." Jake turned to look at her. "How bad is it?" "On our side, remarkably light. We lost about 20,000 military personnel and 50 ships. But the NIGMA," she paused, "complete extinction. Every world sterilized, every individual eliminated, every trace of their civilization erased." "Population estimates?" "Approximately 200 billion NIGMA across 12,000 worlds. All dead." The three humans stood in silence, contemplating the magnitude of what their species had accomplished. In 1 year, humanity had eliminated an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. "Admiral," Jake said finally, "have other species figured out what happened?" "That's the interesting part," Carter replied. "Most of them don't even remember that the NIGMA existed. Our memory virus was more effective than we expected. According to galactic databases, the space once controlled by the NIGMA Empire has always been empty. Dr. Amy Foster's voice came over the ship's communication system. Captain Morrison, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They want to meet with humanity's representatives. Put them through, Jake ordered. The image of Ambassador Kelvran appeared on screen. He was a member of the Zephyrian species, one of the older and more respected civilizations in the galaxy. Captain Morrison, Kelvran said, the Galactic Council has some questions about recent developments in your region of space. What kind of questions, Ambassador? 12,000 star systems in what we call the dark sector have begun showing signs of human colonization. These systems were previously thought to be uninhabitable, but our surveys now show them to be empty and suitable for settlement. Jake exchanged glances with Admiral Carter. The memory virus had worked even better than they had hoped. The galactic community had forgotten the NIGMA so completely that they now viewed their former territory as naturally empty space. We're expanding our civilization, Ambassador, Jake replied carefully. These systems were uninhabited when we found them. Yes, our records confirm that. But, Captain, the speed of your expansion is concerning to some council members. In the past year, humanity has gone from controlling 40 systems to over 12,000. Such rapid growth makes other species nervous. Are you threatening us, Ambassador? Kelvran's expression became uncomfortable. Not threatening, no. But some council members believe that humanity may be becoming too powerful too quickly. There have been suggestions that your expansion should be limited. The communication channel fell silent. Jake looked at Admiral Carter, who nodded slightly. Ambassador Kelvran, Jake said calmly, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. I'm listening. 1 year ago, humanity was threatened with extinction. We were told that we had two choices: submit to our enemies or face complete elimination. We chose a third option. What third option? We eliminated our enemies so completely that the galaxy has forgotten they ever existed. Kelvran's face went pale. Captain, that's impossible. No species has the capability to what? Completely erase another civilization from existence? Jake smiled coldly. Ambassador, the 12,000 systems that humanity now controls were not empty when we found them. They were inhabited by a species that thought they were invincible. Admiral Carter stepped forward. Ambassador, let me be very clear about humanity's position. We have no interest in conquering other species or expanding beyond our current territory. But we also have no intention of allowing anyone to limit our growth or threaten our existence. But surely the Galactic Council has the authority to— The Galactic Council, Jake interrupted, has authority over species that choose to recognize that authority. Humanity chooses not to. Dr. Marcus Webb joined the conversation. Ambassador, I suggest you consult your historical databases. Look up any references to something called the NIGMA Empire. Kelvran was quiet for a moment as he accessed his ship's computer. There are no records of any empire by that name. Exactly, Marcus said. And that should tell you everything you need to know about what happens when someone threatens humanity with extinction. The ambassador's expression became one of growing horror as he began to understand what the humans were telling him. You're saying that you eliminated an entire empire so completely that we've forgotten it existed? We're saying, Admiral Carter replied, that when humanity is threatened with extinction, we ensure that our enemies are the ones who become extinct instead. Jake leaned forward. Ambassador Kelvran, please return to the Galactic Council with this message. Humanity wishes to maintain peaceful relations with all species in the galaxy. We have no aggressive intentions toward anyone. But if any species or organization threatens us with extinction, they will discover that humans are very good at making extinction a reality. This is madness, Kelvran whispered. You've committed genocide on a scale that defies comprehension. Yes, Jake agreed calmly. We have. And we'll do it again if necessary. The choice is up to the other species in the galaxy. Peaceful coexistence or complete elimination. The transmission ended abruptly. Admiral Carter turned to Jake with a concerned expression. Captain, do you think we've made the right choice? Revealing our capabilities to the Galactic Council? They needed to know, Jake replied. Other species need to understand that humanity is not to be threatened with extinction. The NIGMA made that mistake once. We want to make sure no one else repeats it. Dr. Marcus Webb looked out at the empty space where an ancient empire had once stood. Jake, what have we become? We've become what we needed to become, Jake answered. The NIGMA thought they understood warfare, but they had only learned how. To destroy the weak, humanity learned how to destroy the strong. Several hours later, Captain Jake Morrison sat alone in his quarters, writing the final report on humanity's war with the NIGMA Empire. The report would be classified at the highest levels, read only by a few leaders who needed to understand what their species had accomplished. Personal log, Captain Jake Morrison, he spoke to his computer. Today marks the 1-year anniversary of the NIGMA Ultimatum. The empire that threatened humanity with extinction no longer exists. In fact, according to galactic records, it never existed at all. He paused, looking out at the stars through his viewport. Humanity has learned something important about itself. When we are threatened with extinction, we don't just fight to survive. We fight to ensure that our enemies can never threaten anyone else again. The NIGMA Empire discovered this the hard way. The galaxy is now a safer place. 12,000 star systems that were once used as bases for genocide are now empty, available for peaceful colonization. 847 extinct species have been avenged, even though no one remembers they existed. But humanity remembers. We remember what we did, and we remember why we did it. We became genocidal to prevent genocide. We became destroyers to protect the innocent. I hope we never have to make such a choice again. But if we do, the galaxy now knows what humanity is capable of. Jake ended the recording and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other species were going about their lives unaware that an empire which had terrorized the galaxy for 50,000 years had been completely erased by a species they had considered primitive. Humanity had won more than a war. They had won the right to exist without fear, and they had sent a message to the galaxy: threaten humanity with extinction, and discover what extinction really means. The NIGMA Empire had ignored humanity's warning. They had paid the ultimate price for that mistake. Now the galaxy would have to decide whether to learn from the NIGMA's error or discover for themselves what happened when humans were pushed too far. In the emptiness of space where an ancient empire had once stood, Jake Morrison smiled grimly. Humanity had proven that sometimes the best defense was not just a good offense. Sometimes the best defense was complete and total elimination of the threat. The NIGMA Empire was gone, erased so completely that history would never know they had existed, and humanity intended to keep it that way.